Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here today. If you love seeing how dry, bureaucratic decisions can literally ignite massive historical movements, you are in the exact right place. Today, we're focusing on the 1920s in India, which was just a period of immense tension and transformation. We're going to explore how a standard government review, something intended merely to assess progress, ended up acting as a massive catalyst. It completely changed the course of history and set the stage for a nation's ultimate independence.
I want you to imagine a scenario for a second. Imagine that the entire future of your community, your laws, and your rights are all being decided by a group of complete outsiders. People who don't live where you live, who don't share your culture, and who haven't invited a single one of you to actually sit at the negotiating table. That right there is the core friction of the historical event we're breaking down today. So, how did a small 7-man committee from Britain accidentally unite an entire subcontinent and spark India's final push for total freedom?
Okay, let's dive into this. To understand the explosion, we first really need to look at the fuse. Our story starts with the Government of India Act in 1919. Built right into that act was a very specific provision. After 10 years, a commission would be appointed to study the progress of the government scheme and suggest new steps. It was basically supposed to be a routine check-in. But that little mandate tipped the first domino. The commission gets appointed in November 1927, arrives in February 1928, and triggers massive Indian responses later that exact same year. So let's look closely at that very first domino.
Section 1. The All-White Commission.
Let's examine the British action that triggered this whole massive reaction. In November of 1927, thousands of miles away in London, the British government under Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin makes a decision. They officially set up the Indian Statutory Commission. On paper, it sounds incredibly sterile and bureaucratic, doesn't it? The stated goal was simply to recommend whether India was, quote, ready for further constitutional reforms. Basically, the fate of millions of people was going to be evaluated through a single, distant committee.
Let's look at who was actually on this committee. It was chaired by Sir John Simon, representing the Liberal Party, which is why it became popularly known as the Simon Commission. It contained exactly 7 members in total. And what's super fascinating here is one specific name on the roster, Clement Attlee, representing the Labour Party. Talk about a tremendous historical irony. Clement Attlee would actually go on to become the Prime Minister of England during India's actual independence. But here he is, right there, on this 7-member committee in 1927, evaluating India's future.
But there was a glaring, absolute omission. Out of the 7 members tasked with deciding the constitutional future and readiness of India, there were exactly 0 Indians appointed. Not a single Indian voice was given a seat at the table.
Well, you can probably guess the reaction. Because of this complete exclusion, Indians rightly viewed the commission with absolute outrage. They coined a term for it, the White Commission. It was seen as a profound insult to their capability and their right to self-determination. And this reaction wasn't just venting. It turned into organized political action. By December 1927, during its session held in Madras, the Indian National Congress made a really firm resolution. They would completely oppose and boycott the Simon Commission. The stage was totally set for a major confrontation.
Section 2. Protests and Human Cost.
So, as the calendar turned to 1928, this theoretical insult over in London became a very visceral reality on the streets of India. On the 3rd of February, the Simon Commission arrives in Bombay. And instantly, widespread, countrywide strikes followed. Everywhere the commission approached, massive rallies filled the streets, and a single, unified slogan echoed across the subcontinent: Simon, go back. It had moved way past a political disagreement. It was now a physical blockade by the people.
But tragically, these protests came with a terrible human cost. Lala Lajpat Rai, a major, deeply respected political leader of Punjab who had bravely led the freedom struggle, known to many as Punjab Kesari, was leading a rally protesting the Simon Commission. During this protest, the police launched a severe lathi charge. Lala Lajpat Rai was badly injured in the violence, and he heartbreakingly succumbed to those injuries. So now this bureaucratic review had actually spilled blood, which deeply intensified the nation's grief and their resolve.
Section 3. The Nehru Report Response. Following the strikes and that immense tragedy, the Indian political leadership didn't just protest, they launched an intellectual counterstrike. In 1928, they prepared the Nehru Report as a direct answer to the Simon Commission. And it was incredibly comprehensive. It was put together by an all-party committee. So this wasn't just one faction, it was a united front of 9 members, including 2 Muslim members. It was headed by Motilal Nehru, with his son Jawaharlal Nehru serving as the secretary. Instead of waiting around for the British to decide their fate, they outlined their own demands. They demanded dominion status for India. Crucially, instead of the British system of separate electorates, they proposed united constituencies with reserved places for minorities. And then it just stopped at the government structure. They demanded fundamental rights for Indians. We're talking freedom of speech, the right to form assemblies, the freedom to publish a newspaper, and the freedom to form associations. It was essentially a complete alternative blueprint for the nation.
Let's move to and see how this builds. Section 4. Demand for complete freedom.
Now, the Nehru Report, as hugely significant as it was, actually triggered a further dramatic escalation within Indian politics itself. The report had demanded dominion status, which basically means self-government within the British Empire. But for some leaders, especially after the sheer arrogance of the Simon Commission and the violence of the protests, dominion status just wasn't going to cut it anymore. So in that exact same year, 1928, a radical shift occurred. Leaders like Subhash Chandra Bose and Jawaharlal Nehru, who, remember, had just been the secretary for the Nehru Report, pushed things even further. They founded the Independence for India League. Their goal? To reject dominion status entirely and demand complete independence. The political landscape had fundamentally shifted. And that brings us to our final thought. The Simon Commission was sent to just manage India, to calmly evaluate it from a distance. But by arrogantly refusing to give Indians a seat at the table, the British government managed to do the exact opposite. They united fractured political parties, they ignited nationwide mass protests, and they totally accelerated an unstoppable demand, not just for reform, but for total, uncompromised freedom. Which really leaves us with a powerful question to consider. When a government refuses to share a seat at the table, does it inevitably force the people to build a completely new table? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this deep dive helped illuminate the incredible chain reactions of history. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.